begin today the Gemara on Daf Yudal Amud Beis at the Mishnah towards the bottom of the Amud. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Mokaim shenagu limkoi behem medaka lo'ev dekachavim. In a place where the custom is that they sell small animals to goyim. Meichen, so you can sell. Mokim shenagu shaloi limkoi, in a place where the custom is that they do not sell small animals to goyim. Ei meichen, you may not sell it to them. So Rashi here brings, as we'll see in the Gemara, the reason for not selling to animals to goyim is because of mishkov behema, because of bestiality. We're afraid that you're selling to goyim and they're going to have relations with this animal, and therefore you're being over on lifnei iveh. You're causing a guy to do this, which is aser, even for a guy. When it says in the pasuk v'davak be'ishtoi v'hoya lebasar echad, that says by Adam Rishon. So therefore this is an isser even for a guy, so therefore you may not sell it to a guy to cause him to be over on this isser. Now, b'chol makayim, yeah, this is any time. B'chol makayim, and in any place, ein moichen lehem behem agasa. This is not dependent on a minig. Wherever you are, you may not sell large animals to a guy, like a cow, a horse, a donkey. And the reason for this, as we'll see in the Gemara, is because the guy will work with it on Shabbos. And the Gemara will explain why that is an issue if the guy works with it on Shabbos. Agolim usyachim, and that includes also small calves, asyachim, which is like young horses or young donkeys. So even though they're smaller, but because they will grow large, so you may not sell them as well. And whether shleimin, whether these animals are healthy, whole, or shvurin, even if it has a broken leg or something that it can't do any work. So really the concern of it doing work on Shabbos does not apply. But if you're going to sell one that has a broken leg, you may come to sell a full healthy animal to a guy, so it's not allowed as well. Rabbi Yehuda mate b'shvura. However, Rabbi Yehuda says that regarding these large animals, you are allowed to sell to a guy if it has a broken leg. Ben Beseide mate b'sus. Ben Beseide says you're allowed to sell a guy a horse because even though he may then ride it on Shabbos, but riding a horse on Shabbos is not an ism in HaTorah in the first place. Because a human being that rides on a horse, because the rule is chai noises atzmai. Person that's alive, he carries his own weight to some extent. So when you ride on a horse on Shabbos, it's only ism d'Rabbanan. So therefore there's no gzeira for this when the guy will take this horse and ride it on Shabbos. And by other behemoths, they're used to carry loads, they're used to do other work, but not necessarily for a person to ride on it. So over there is a problem, that the guy will do work with it on Shabbos.
Riding on a horse on
Shabbos?
On Shabbos
is Isam D'Rabbanan.
It's not the right.
Correct. Yeah. Shall we say the Isura Leka, that regarding selling small animals to a guy, there is no Isser, and Minhaguhu. It's all just a custom that they were machmer in certain places where there was a minig not to sell these small animals to goyim. So only minhagu de ikke. And heiche de nog is a nog, and therefore in the place where there is this custom, so it's forbidden, and heiche de nog heter nog. And the places where the minig is that it's allowed, that you sell to a guy, there it's allowed. So it's all just up to a minig. So the Gemara asks on this, mini, but the contradiction here is, it says in the Braise, ein mamidim beheme bepundukaya shalev de gechavim. You're not allowed to place your behemoths in the inns where goyim are staying there, because they are suspected of having relations with these animals. So you see that there's an isser here. It doesn't say that there's any minig about this. Amar Rav, so Rav explained that it is an isser, but it depends what the place is. Makim shehitiru limkair, in the place where they're allowed to sell hitiru liyached. They also allowed to place your animals by the inn of a guy. Because if it's a place where you know that goyim there are not going to do these kind of things, so you could sell them, you can place the animals in the inn by goyim. Makim she'asru liyached, in the place where they said that it's forbidden to place the animals by the inn of a guy, so then asru limkar. They also said that it's not allowed to be sold to them. Right, so it is totally in the minig, but what's the minig over here? The minig is totally in whether it's a place where where you know that this is what goyim do, so then it's aser, and a place where this is not what they do, so then it's going to be mutter, both whether selling or whether placing your animals there amongst the goyim where they stay. That's one answer. Rav Elazar says, af b'mokim she'asru liyached, even if it's a place that it is aser to place your animals amongst goyim, and they're in, but mutalimke. But to sell to them, it would be allowed. So regarding selling, it is totally in a minig, and it's not forbidden as much as it would be to place your animals by goyim. My time, and what's the reason? Because ovid kechavim chasal behemte. Once you're selling it to a guy, now it's his animal, so now he's careful with his own animal. Shaloi teyake. He's careful not to have a relation with this behemoth, because if he will, it may sterilize his animal. And he doesn't want to do that. So if he owns the animal, so here there's less of a concern that this would happen. But when it comes to placing your animals in the inn where goyim are staying, it's your animal. It doesn't belong to the guy. So the guy doesn't care about that. So the chashash of a guy having relations with this animal is the strong chashash. So therefore over there it says that you may never place it amongst the goyim. But when it comes to selling to a guy, since it belongs to a guy, here it will depend on the minik. Now the Gemara says, V'af Rav that gave the answer before that said that these two things are the same, but Rav Hadabei, he had charata from the answer that he gave before, because the Amar of Tachlife, Amar of Shile, Baravimi, Mishmei de Rav, Oivid Kechavim, Chasal Behem Teshletak. Rav himself said this svara that when you sell to a guy, there's less of a concern, and therefore here it's totally in the minig. It depends. Some places they still would noyig iser, but it's not really a iser me'ikar adin, because a guy is careful with his own animal because he's afraid if he has relations with it that'll become sterile. The next halach in the Mishnah it said, you may not sell large animals to a guy. My time, what's the reason for this? Even if, as we explained, that for Leviyah, there's no concern when you sell to a guy because he's careful with the animal that he owns. But what's the reason why you may not sell these large animals to a guy? But mavid be melacha chashina. We are concerned that the guy will be doing melacha, he'll do work with this animal on Shabbos. So therefore you may not sell to a guy because a yid may not do melacha on Shabbos with his animal. The shvisa on Shabbos, if the rest on Shabbos refers to the animal as well. In fact, the Gemara, but what's the problem? If the guy, after he buys the animal and he works with it on Shabbos, v'navid, let him work with the animal. Kivan de Zavne Kanye. He bought this animal, he acquired it, it's his, so now he can work with it as much as he wishes. Answers the Gemara, Gzeire mishum sheila or mishum schiris. No, there's a Gzeire chacham or geyser that if you're going to sell this animal to a guy, this large animal to a guy, you may come to rent it, he may come to rent it to him or lend it to him, and then the animal still belongs to the Yid. And if the animal still belongs to the Yid and the guy is working with it on Shabbos, then the Yid is the one that's over the Isser. When it says in the Pasuk, Le'sasa kal malacha, Rashi quotes here the Pasuk, Le'sasa kal malacha, and v'chol behemtecha, that means that as long as you're the owner of the animal, work may not be done with the animal, even if the Yid is not doing the work with the animal. Even if the guy, which is renting or borrowing the animal, is doing the work with the Yid's animal, it's Asar on Shabbos.
Yeah, but he didn't purchase it.
Right, so but it's Exeida, correct. So the Gemara is saying it's Exeida. If you're going to be allowed to sell these large animals to a guy, you may come to rent it to him or lend it to him. As the Gemara will soon say, what happens many times is when you want to sell an animal to a guy, the guy is not sure if he wants to buy this animal, doesn't know the nature of the animal, so what does he do? He borrows it first or he rents it first and sees how the animal works, and then he'll go and buy it. So if you'll be allowed to sell these animals to a guy, you may come to lend it to him or rent it to him, and then if it does work on Shabbos, the Yid is over on the Isser. So the Gemara asks, wait a minute, even if you lend it to him or rent it to him, Shaila Kanya and Va'agre Kanya. Even when he borrows it or when he rents it, at the time when it's in the guy's possession, by renting or borrowing, doesn't he acquire it to be his then? When you borrow something or you rent something, you take a responsibility. There's a responsibility by Shaila. If you borrow something, even if an oinus happens, you have to reimburse this. By rental, so not an oinus, but gneva, va'aveda, you have to reimburse. So there's a certain level of a kinyan. The person that's now renting or borrowing, it's his to some extent. Shouldn't that be enough? An acquirement, the guy that acquires it, that if he works with it on Shabbos, then the Yid is not over on any Yisr. Okay, so the Gemara accepts this question, and the Gemara gives a different reason. Ella Omar Rami Berei de Rav Yeva, that the reason why you may not sell large animals to a guy is because Gzeire Mishum Nisyani. There's a gzeira here, when you sell animals to a guy, what's if the guy wants to take it for a test, or like a test drive? The guy wants to test out this animal. And then the Yid may be the one that will end up doing a Isser here. Why? Because the Zimnin, what would happen is, the Zavnala Ne'alei Samach L'Shkiya Sachama. You're making a deal with a guy and you're selling him this animal right before Shabbos, right by Shkiya Sachama, the Maila Shabbat on Friday afternoon. Now, V'amalei, and the guy says to the Yid, Ta Nasye Ne'alei. Come, let me test out this animal. Let me see how it carries packages. Let me see how it walks, what it does. But what happens is, the animal which is sensitive to the voice of his Yiddish owner, so he hears the voice of his Yiddish owner talking, and because of the voice of the Yiddish owner, it walks 4 amas in Rishus Harabim. That's a malacha, that it walked 4 amas in Rishus Harabim. And even though when the Yid was speaking, he wasn't speaking to the animal to have it walk, but he's happy that the animal is walking, because he wants to demonstrate to the guy that this is a healthy animal, that it can walk and can carry packages, that he should want to buy the animal. And then what happens is, so now here the Yid is causing the animal, he's leading this animal, he's mechamer, leading the animal on Shabbos. And one that leads his animal on Shabbos is going to be chayiv a korban chatos. So this is the chash, that if you're going to be allowed to sell large animals to a guy, you may end up selling right before Shabbos, and then you'll end up being mechamer, and therefore be chayiv a chatos. Now, just to clarify, this halacha of mechamer that the Gemara is bringing up here is different than what was brought up before. Before it was brought up something else. A Yid's animal may not work on Shabbos, not only when you're leading it or you're doing the work with it. Even if someone else, a guy, a worker, is doing the work with the animal, that's a issa. The behemoth has to rest on Shabbos like the Yid himself. Here, this is another issa, mechamer. Mechamer is when the Yid is leading it. That's a stronger issa. For the fact that your behemoth does work on Shabbos, you're not chayav a korban chatos. For a mechamer, when you're leading the animal, which is what the Gemara is describing, could happen. When with your voice the animal is walking, mechamer yechayev achatas. And the reason the Gemara is bringing up tafke mechamer is because it wants to explain why chachamim would be geyser here. You may think this is something which is not so common to happen, punkt by shkiyas achamer, that you'll end up selling, and with your voice the animal will walk. But because this is mechamer, it's not just the animal doing work on its own, but it's happening through your voice. That's something which is more chomer, and therefore chachamim were geyser never to sell large animals to a guy. This is nisyoni, mishum nisyoni. No. It's not one of the lamates malachis, but you still chayiv chatas for it. It's actually a machlekes in the Gemara and Shabbos whether you chayiv a chatas for mechamer. Rashi brings in the Gemara and Shabbos it's a machlekes, but here the Gemara is going according to the opinion that although it's not from the lamates malachis, you are chayiv a korban chatas on mechamer.
Mechamer, even leading it, if you do it on Shabbos, it's like doing the acquisition on Shabbos, which is a definite...
No, that's something else. And we're not talking about the Kinyan. That's a no. We're talking about mechamer. Okay, but now the Gemara, though, goes back to the first reason that it gave, and there will be a big discussion here about this. What was the first reason the Gemara said? That if you will be allowed to sell, you may come to rent it or lend it to the guy. And the Gemara said, no, that's not a problem, because if you rent it or lend it to a guy, then he acquires it. Just like if you sell it to him, it belongs to him. Renting and lending is also, he acquires it, so there's no problem if the animal works. So the Gemara asks on that premise. So Rav Shesha Ravidi asks on that. Is it true that when a person rents something, that at that time during the rental, he acquires it, the renter, it belongs to him? But Vatanan, the Gemara brings from Mishnah later in this Perek. So the Mishnah there discusses regarding renting a house to a guy. So it says you're not supposed to rent a house to a guy in Eretz Yisrael. Now then the Gemara, the Mishnah there says that in Chutz La'aretz you are allowed to rent your house, a room in your house, to a guy. But then the Mishnah says, Af b'mokim she'omru lahasker, even in a place where it was said that you're allowed to rent to a guy, but loy lebeis dir omru. You're not allowed to rent him a space where he is going to be living there. And you could rent him a space for other things, but not to live there. Why? Because the place where he's living, he brings inside his Avoda Zara. And you may not give him a space where he's going to bring his Avoda Zara into your house that he's renting.
This is
outside. This is in Chutz La'aretz. But now the Gemara's question is, but if you're going to say that once one rents, so now he acquires it, it's his space. So this guy, if he's bringing Avoda Zara into the space in the house that he's renting, he's bringing it into his own house. What's the problem? So it must be that even after the guy rents, it's considered to be your house, and therefore you may not rent it. You're not allowed to bring Avoda Zara into your own house. So that proves that Schiras does not acquire. So we could still go back to the first reason the Gemara says before, that you should not sell to a guy an animal, because you may come to rent it to him, and during the rental, it still belongs to the Yid. So the Gemara answers, no, there's no raya from this case of Avoda Zara, because Shani Avodas Kachavim, by Avoda Zara it's different, the Chamira. Here by Avoda Zara you see that there's a great stringency that you don't find by other Isurim. The Chsiv, the Pasuk says, V'leisavi to'eva el beisecha, that regarding Avoda Zara, you may not bring the Avoda Zara into your home, so therefore here, Chacham were very machmer, not even to rent it to him, even if he acquires it during the rental, but nevertheless, you should not allow the guy to rent and bring the Avoda Zara into the house. The only other Isser that you find such a kind of thing is obviously by Chometz, by Motza. But Avoda Zara, similar to Chometz, where you may not have it in your home, Chacham were machmer not to rent to a guy, even if the guy acquires it during the rental. Another Shailik Gemara asks, Maskal, Lord of Yitzchak, Bereider of Mishar Shiyeh, Oschiros, Mi, Kanya. When there's a rental, does the renter acquire the space that it's now his? Well, Tanan, we learned the following halacha. Yisrael shesacha para mikayin, a yid that rents a cow from a kayin. So Yachileno karshine trume, he's allowed to give this animal that belongs to the kayin karshine trume, which is animal feed, veggies, or I think it's some kind of veged. So this is food for the animals, which is truma. You're allowed to feed this animal. Okay, so Rashi here explains that this truma that you're feeding it, usually, I mean, if it would be food that's edible for a human being, you don't give it to an animal. But we're talking about animal food. But also, this truma, who does this truma belong to? How could the yid give this truma food to the animal? So Rashi explains this truma. The yid separated this truma. The truma doesn't belong to any individual kain. You can give it to any kain. So this kain that you rented his animal is very happy for you to give this truma to this animal. He's not losing out anything by this adarabah. If the yid is going to feed the animal with his own food, he's going to be very skimpy on feeding this animal because he has to give from his own food. But if he's feeding it truma that he anyways has to give away, the kain is going to feed his animal very well. So the kain is happy that he should feed this animal truma. So you're not taking away this truma from any kain. Or Rashi says it could be that this Yisrael has truma that he yarshened from his grandfather, which was a kain. So he feeds this animal the truma. So what do you see over here? What's the point you see over here? That this animal, during the time of the rental, when it belongs to the yid, the yid does not acquire this animal. It still belongs to the kain. Okay, then it's similar. The Brisa says, the Mishnah goes on to say, the kain shesacha param Yisrael, a kain that rents a cow from a yid, aval pishim zaynesel alav, even though it's the kain that has the responsibility to feed this animal, lo yachilena kashini truma. He should not feed it this animal feed from truma because the animal belongs to the yid, even though he's renting it, but you do not acquire during the rental. It belongs to the owner. So if you would say that during the rental you acquire it, so why would the kayan not be allowed to feed this animal with the truma if the para belongs to him? And similar, the Mefarshim say similar, the Gemara could have proven the same thing l'chayda from the Reisha of this Mishnah. The Mefarshim explain why the Gemara focuses on the Sefer, but over here clearly you see that by a rental you do not acquire the rental. So therefore, the Gemara actually goes back to what it said before. Elo shmami no schiris lekanya. So from here, we actually clearly see that during a rental, the renter does not acquire it. It still belongs to the original owner. He rents it, and he has certain responsibilities and rights to use it, but it's not his. So now that we concluded that during a rental you do not acquire, Gzeira, we go back to the original Gzeira. We said, why may you not sell large animals to a guy? Gzeira mishum schiras, because you may come to rent it to him. Or Gzeira mishum sheila, you may come to lend it to him. And then, if the animal works on Shabbos, the yid is over on a Isser. And also, we could give the second reason, Gzeira mishum nisyani. And there's a Gzeira that you may test it at the time of a sale, and you may come to be mechamer right when Shabbos comes in.
Sheila here.
Again, yeah, Shaila is the same thing, true, even though the Gemara didn't discuss it, but apparently the Gemara holds that if you say that by schiris you don't acquire, it's similar by borrowing, that the one that borrows does not acquire what he borrows. Okay, so now the Gemara brings Rav Ade, Shore lezavuni chamre, Idi the safsira. Rav Ada allowed to sell a donkey to a guy if it's being done through a middleman, through a broker. What's the reason? And even if that broker is a yid. And the reason is, if the reason is that we're concerned that during the sale it may be right by shkia, and then the animal will be walking by the voice of the owner, but that doesn't apply here. The animal doesn't recognize the voice of this middleman, so it may not. It's not going to. The Azla Machma say that it would walk because of the voice of this middleman, so it's not going to happen. So that's not a concern. And if
It's not going to walk, or it's not going to happen.
it's not going to walk as a result of the voice of this middleman. The concern is that you may come to be over and mechamer, but that's not going to happen if it's a middleman. It doesn't recognize its voice. If the issue is that you may come to lend it or rent it to the guy, but kivin deloy didehi, but since this middleman, he's not the owner of this animal. So he's just a broker that sells these animals. He's not lending it to anyone. He's not renting it to anyone. He doesn't. It's not his to do this. And furthermore, he doesn't want to do this. Mishum nigli bei mume. This is a middleman. What is he trying to do here? He's trying to make a quick sale and get his fee, his cut out of the sale. He's going to go and rent it to this guy or lend it to him, so the guy should see the condition of the animal before he sells it to him, and he might find a blemish and not want to buy it. He wants to make a quick sale, so we're not concerned that he may come to lend it to him or rent it to him. So therefore, in this case, it's allowed. Gemara says, Rav Huna sold a cow to a guy, a large animal to a guy, which we said is not allowed. So Amalei Rav Chizde, my time of it mar hochi. So Rav Chizde asked him, why did you do this? Amalei, so he answered, Eimer l'shchita zavna, because I could say that this guy, he's not buying the animal to do any work. He's buying the animal to shecht it, to slaughter it, and to eat from it. So therefore, in such a case, there's nothing to be concerned about. Okay, so over here you see that you're toile lakula, meaning if there's room to say, if there's a good reason to say that the guy is not going to work with the animal, but he's just going to use it to shecht, so then you're allowed to sell even large animals to a guy.
Unless he shechts it for his son's wedding.
That's something else. That's something else. Okay, yeah, but that's not what we're talking about over here. Okay, so now if we hear there's a long thesis, as you see, this thesis discusses why bisman hazeh, and this is also brought in the Pesachim Shulchan Aruch. This whole gzeira that we're talking about is not really done. You can sell today. We're not selling any animals, but anybody that sells animals, this issur of selling animals to a guy is not really kept. And animals are sold to goyim all the time. So Taisus here says either it's being sold by a middleman, as the Gemara explained. If it's sold by a middleman, it's not a problem. Or the svara that the Gemara says now that if it's being sold and you could know that the guy is going to buy it just for shchita, so that just he's using it for the meat, so then there's no problem to sell it to a guy. Okay, so the Gemara is going to discuss now this concept over here that you're selling it. It's possible that the guy will use it for work. It's possible that the guy will use it for shchita, but we're toile lahakal. We're going to accept. We're going to say that the guy is probably going to shecht it, and therefore we're going to be mekel, and you're allowed to sell it to the guy. So the Gemara has said this. From where do I know that we could say something like this, that it could be toile lahakal? So over here, Rashi says that we're going to see over here from a Mishnah that we're toile lahakal in a case we're selling it. There may be a problem of lifnei iver when you sell something, but there may not be. And we're going to be toile lahakal that we're not going to be concerned for lifnei iver. Because the Tanan, so we learned in the Mishnah, Beishamai Yemin, Beishamai says, this is a Mishnah regarding Shemitah. Lo yimkar adam para hachireshes b'shvius. You're not allowed to sell to a person that is suspected for not keeping Shemitah, so you may not sell him a cow in Shemitah, because he's suspected that what is he going to use this cow for? To plow during Shemitah. So you're being over and lifnei iver, you're causing this year to plow in Shemitah. But Beisila says that it's allowed because he can use it to plow, but he could also use it to shecht it and eat it. So Beisila says, in such a case where it can go either way, we're toile lahakal. We say that that we're mekel, we're lenient, that you could sell it to him, that he's going to shecht. So the Gemara is saying that you can say similar to the case over here, when you're selling the animal to a guy on Shabbos, that we're toile lahakal, that the guy is not going to work with it on Shabbos, he's going to shecht it. So that's the comparison. So the Gemara asks in this, Omar Rabbe or Rove, Midami, how can you compare to that Mishnah in Shemitah? Hasam over there, ein adam mitzuva shvisis behemte b'shvius. Over there, when you're selling this animal to a yid that's suspected of not keeping shmita, the issue over there is not the fact that the owner may not have his animal work during shmita. There's no issue for your animal to work during shmita. What's the problem? The problem is the buyer, the yid, that he may work during shmita. So over there's the issue of lifnei iver. So you could say that you're toiler lahakol, that you only over and lifnei iver in a case where it's clear that the buyer is going to stumble on an aveda. But in this case where it's not clear, he may shecht it. So over here the isser lifnei iver does not apply. But hacha, over here we're talking about something else. Adam mitzuva shvisis be'emtoi b'Shabbos. It's the issue for the seller, that you're selling an animal and you, the seller himself, he's not allowed to have his animal work on Shabbos. So over here, who says that we're lenient about this? When you sell to a guy and the animal may work on Shabbos, so we should be machmer about this. The chacham were geizer not to sell your animal to a guy. So you can't compare the two things. Now this itself, the Gemara here brings different questions from other places where we see the two opposite things, as the Gemara here will point out that we see about this. So Amalei Abaye, so Abaye asks on what Rava said, or what Rava said, Chol heiche, the Adam mitzvah. Are you telling me that any case where the person himself is commanded, it's an isser on him, on the seller, aser? In such a case, it would be aser. Over here, you're saying that because it's for the seller, it's an isser to have his behemoth work on Shabbos, and now you're selling your animal. It could be that the guy will work with it. Could be that the guy will shecht it. So over here, do you say that because it's your isser, we're going to be machmer? We're not going to be toiler lahakol, we're going to be machmer. But I'll give you an example where the isser is for the seller, and we're going to be makel about this. You own a field, and a person is not allowed to work in shmita on shmita. Otnan, and the Mishnah says, or this is a brayse, Tanya, it says in the brayse, Beishamay say lo yimker adam sdei nir b'shvius. In shmita, you may not sell a plowed field in shmita because what's a plowed field for? A plowed field is for a person to come and work in it. And you're selling it to somebody, and you're going to be being over on lifnei iver. You're selling it to someone that's suspected for working in shmita, and he's going to work within a shmita. But Beis Hillel say that it is allowed because who tells you he's actually going to use it in shmita, even though he's suspected of working in shmita? But maybe he won't work in shmita. He's buying the field now. He has an opportunity to buy this property now, and he's going to leave it empty. And he's only going to work with it after Shemitah. So what do you see over here? This is a case where the person himself, the seller himself, is also mitzvah. It's also for him to work in this field in Shemitah. And what does it say? Beis Hillel says that we're toiler lahakol. You're allowed to sell it to somebody that's suspected in working in Shemitah because we're still going to say that no, he just bought the property because he has an opportunity to buy the property now. But he's going to keep it empty until after Shemitah. Now the Gemara actually brings a question which will show the opposite point. Ravashi asks on the first point that Rabbi said before. Shari, in any case where the seller himself, for the seller, there is no isser here. Is it going to be allowed to sell to someone that you may cause him to be over an isser? Selling vessels or utensils that are used to work in a field on Shemitah. So the seller, he has no isser, that these kalim themselves that he's selling, that they have to rest and not be used during Shemitah. The isser is in the field, not on the kalim themselves. And Tanan, what does the Mishnah say? Elohen kalim, these are the utensils she'ein adam rashoy l'moichram b'shvius, that you're not allowed to sell on Shemitah to someone that you suspect that he's going to use them in Shemitah. Hamachreisha, the plow, the chol keleh, and all the different parts that are used with the plow. Ha'oil, the yoke that's used for the animal to go do the work. V'hamazre, which is the utensil that's used for winnowing. Is that what they have there? I think it's for winnowing. And v'hadeker, which is basically a shovel. All these utensils used to do work in the field, you may not sell it to someone that's going to work with it in Shemitah. So what do you see over here? These utensils, why would someone be buying these utensils during Shemitah? Over here, it's very difficult to say, oh, he found an opportunity to buy these utensils now, so he's buying it now. You could say that by a property. When a person sees a property for sale, you could say that he's buying it now, but he's only going to work with it after Shemitah. He's buying it now because the property to buy doesn't happen every day. But these utensils, why would he buy these utensils now? because he wants to work in the field now. So you may not sell it to someone that's suspected of working in Shemitah. But over here, the point is, you see that even though there's no Isser of Shvisas Kalim for the seller, but you may not sell it to a Yid that may come to work with this.
Maybe it was a sale.
So therefore,
Maybe it was a sale.
Again?
Maybe it was a sale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's apparently Rashi says that by Kalim, it's not the same like by properties. Properties, you could say that he had an opportunity to buy. So Elam Ravashi, so therefore Ravashi says the rule is different. So here again, the point that we're discussing is when you sell something and it's not clear what the buyer is going to do with it. You could say lahakal, that he may not use it in a isser way, or you could say lachumra, that he will use it in an isser way. So what's the rule for this? In a case where you have a very good reason to believe that he's not going to do an isser with it, so then we will assign this concept, we will say that we could be lenient about this, right? So that's, for example, when you're selling a property in Shemitah. So you could assume that he bought the property because he found an opportunity to buy, but he's not going to work with it right now. And that's even if the seller also is included in this isser. But in a case where logically it doesn't make sense to be lenient about this, there's no reason to say that he would not do the Isser, then leitalina. Then we're not going to be lenient about this. And then that's afagav deinu mitzvah. Even if the seller, there's no Isser for him in this, but it doesn't matter. If you know for the buyer, lifnei either, that if he's buying these utensils now, right, regarding the second Mishnah here, if he's buying these utensils, he probably wants to use it now. In such a case, you can't sell it to him. That's the rule about this. So basically, this whole concept of whether you go l'kol or l'chumre, you have to look logically. Well, does it make more sense to be mekel, to be machmer, based on what it is that you're selling him? Is it more likely that he will use it be'isr or not? And then you could be mekel about this.
Even though you might end up buying them anyway for somebody else to
what?
I'm saying to use these kelim in the Isser way, right? You're not going to buy them from you, but they might buy them from you. Buy
Someone
them
else. Yeah, but that's not yet. But that's not your business. Yeah, correct. Okay, now the Gemara says, Rabbe Zavir Ahu Chamre Li Yisrael HaChoshud Lim Keloi V'Kechavim. Rabbe sold a donkey to another Yid. Now this other Yid was suspected that he would not listen to the Gzeira of Chachamim and he would sell this donkey to a guy. Okay, so now you didn't directly sell your donkey to a guy, which is not allowed, but you sold it to a Yid that's suspected of selling it to a guy. So Amalei Abaye, so Abaye says to Rabbe, my time of it Mar Hachi. Why did you do this? You're selling it to someone that you know that he'll then go and sell it to a guy. So Amalei, so Rabbi said, Anali Yisrael Zavini. I sold this animal to a Yid. And not if that Yid goes and sells it to another guy, that's not my problem. But Amalei, so Rabbi argued back, but this Yid is going to go and sell it to another guy. So lo'evik kechavim kamazbin, so li'Yisrael loy kamazbin. So Rabbi said, so what? He's only going to sell to a guy, and he's not going to sell to another yid. This is you're selling it to another yid that will sell this donkey. He's not buying it for himself. He's buying it to sell to someone else. Who's he going to sell it to? He might sell it to a guy, and he also might sell it to a yid. So therefore, Rabbi said, in such a case, you tailor lahakal, and you say that Lav Dafki is going to sell it to a guy. He may sell it to another yid, and therefore Rabbi said it's okay. Okay, but the Gemara now asks, the Abaye continued asking on Rabbe. Eisvei, Abaye asked on Rabbe, and here the Gemara is going to bring, Abaye is going to bring a question to prove the point that if you sell to someone, and there's a strong reason to believe that he may sell it then to a guy, it should not be allowed. What was the source? So it says as follows: Malgim shenagul limkoi behemedakis. So now we're going back to the first halacha that we learned before in the Mishnah about selling small animals. So in a place where the minig was that you sell small animals lekutim, to the kutim. So now the kutim, they're not exactly like goyim. Kutim, in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, they were Megayer, but their geiros was because they were attacked by lions, and therefore there's always a discussion in the Gemara if they're Yidden or not. And even if they are, but they didn't keep the gzeiris of Chachamim, they didn't behave properly. So in a place where the minig was that they sold small animals to the kutim, moichrin, you could sell it to them. Shaloi limkayr, in a place where the minig was not to sell it to them, ein moichrin. You're not allowed to sell to the kutim. That's what it says in this braisa. So the question is, why should it not be allowed to sell to kutim? My time. What's the reason why there would be a minig not to sell these small animals to kutim? If you would say the reason is because they're suspected, what the Gemara said before, arviyah, on bestiality. are the kutim suspected for such a thing, to have a relation with an animal? The Gemara brings a clear brayse that that's not the case. Because what Tanya we learned in the brayse, you're not allowed to place your animals by the inns of goyim, and that's in all kinds of cases. Scharim etzel scharim, males by males, nekevis etzel nekevis, females by females, and vein tzarech loima, needless to say, nekevis etzel scharim, scharim etzel nekevis, to put a female animal in a place where there's goyim that are males or the opposite, that's definitely forbidden. And also, by goyim, you may not give your animals to keep by a goy that's a shepherd for the same reason. And also, or the gersa here is you shouldn't be alone with a guy in a case where there's a suspicion that he could kill you. And also, you shouldn't give your child to a guy that the guy should teach him any subject, or lalamde umnis, or you could teach him any profession, because we're afraid that the guy may, Rashi here says that the concern is, even if there's no concern of the guy killing the child, but there's a concern that he may teach him things that are minus, heresy, or also mishkav zacher is a concern, and therefore you shouldn't give your child to be alone to learn by a guy. This is all regarding a guy. This is all by a guy. But by a kuti, all of this is not a concern. You could place your animal by the pundik of a kuti, scharim etzel nekevis, nekevis etzel scharim, which even it would be more concerned, but we're not concerned about this. And then tzarech loima, needless to say, scharim etzel scharim, nekevis etzel nekevis, it's not an issue. And also, you can give your animals to a kuti, which is a shepherd. You could be alone with a kuti. And your child could learn a profession or anything by a kuti. So what do we see from this? Alma lechashidi. So we see that the kutim are not suspected of having relations with an animal. So why would it be forbidden to sell an animal to a kuti? So the Gemara is proving from here, the only reason that there was a minig not to sell an animal to a kuti is because that kuti then will go and sell it to a guy. So from here, Abaye proves that similar, Rabbe sold an animal to one yid that was suspected to sell it then to a guy. From this Isser by the kutim, or this minig by the kutim, we see that we are concerned for this. Tanya, another proof, another brayso we learned. You don't sell to a guy any weapons, v'lei klei zayin, and not anything that's needed for weapons, like handles to fix the weapons. And they mashchizin lem zayin. You don't sharpen and help them with their weapons. They moichel lem leisadon, v'lei kolorim, v'lei kavolim, v'lei shalshaloy, shal barzel. These are different kinds of things that are used to imprison someone, to hold his feet together, or put the around his neck to put or around his hands to tie him together. All these things you don't sell to goyim, and that's echad oivdei kechavim. You don't sell any of these things not to goyim, and ve'echad kuti, and you don't sell any of these things to a kuti either. Again, any of these weapons or any of these chains either to a kuti. So again, here the Gemara explains why is a kuti in the same category as a guy. My time, what's the reason you may not sell to a kuti? If you would say the reason is, just like you're not allowed to sell these to a guy because he may kill someone or he may imprison someone with this, so would you say that the same applies to a kuti? But that's not true. Are the kutim suspected for killing someone? But we said before, you may be alone with a kuti, they're not suspected for killing a yid. So the conclusion of all of this is Mishom the Asi Lizavune, because the kuti may then come and sell it to a guy. So if you see that by the kuti, so then why shouldn't we say the same thing? That Rabbe shouldn't have been allowed to sell his donkey to this yid that's suspected to selling it then to a guy. Okay, so the Gemara says, if you'll argue and say, kuti lo'ovet tshuva. By a kuti there's a concern that the kuti will sell it to a guy, and the kuti doesn't do tshuva. So that's why you're not allowed to sell it to him. But Yisrael ovet tshuva. But when you're selling it to a yid that's suspected of selling it to a guy, but he's a yid and he may do tshuva, so we should be tayla lahakol that he won't sell it to a guy. So therefore, Rabbe was allowed to sell this animal to a yid. But the Gemara says, "But v'ha'amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabbe bar Avuah, kederech she'amru asa limka lo'evik echavim." Just like it was said, you may not sell large animals to a guy that will come to work with it on Shabbos. So the reason that we explained before, kach asa limka liYisrael hachashu limka lo'evik echavim. So too, you're not allowed to sell your large animal to a yid that is suspected of then coming and selling it to a guy. So after all of this was asked and was proven, so now Rabbe realized that what he did was a mistake. He sold it to this yid, Rod Pasrei Tlasa Parsi. he tried to run after this Yid that he sold it to, 3 parsa, a very long distance, or Vikadamri, another version here is, parsa b'chola, he ran after only 1 parsa, but it was in sand, which is difficult to run, and he ran after him, and he couldn't reach him. But he tried to get back this animal because he realized he made a mistake, that he sold it to this Yid. Omar Abdimi Barabe says, just like you're not allowed to sell to a goy these what was mentioned before, not allowed to sell these weapons that a goy could use. Also limkil Yisrael, you may not sell to a Yid, a robber, as well. So the Gemara asks, why not? Hey Chadami, what is the case? What kind of a robber are we talking about? If this is a Yid, a robber that's a murderer, you suspect that he will kill. So Pshita, obviously you're not allowed to sell it to him. It's the same exact thing like a guy that there's a concern that he may kill someone with these weapons. If it's someone that does not kill with these weapons, he's not a robber that will kill anyone, so then am I loy. So why shouldn't you be allowed to sell it to this Yid that's a robber? It says, really, this is a robber that does not kill. He's not like this bandit that kills people. But what's the case where it's coming, the chiddush here that he was coming to say that you shouldn't sell it to this Yid that's a robber, b'mashmuta. This is a Yid that's a robber where he goes and grabs things from people, and he's not an armed robber that comes and steals and kills people, but he grabs things away. But the zimnin, the avid latzulin avshay. But sometimes in such a kind of robbery, if it'll go bad, and then they'll be chasing him, he'll try to save his life, and he'll use these weapons to save himself. So this robber always has these weapons on him in case something goes bad. So therefore, by selling these weapons to this Yid, you may end up causing him to be confident with himself to steal. So therefore, you're not allowed to sell these weapons even to this kind of Yid as well.
Rabbi, the guy that